All right, this is episode 3 of our Advanced Business Communications for Data Storytellers series with Dave Coughlin. Dave, welcome back. Always a pleasure.
Thank you, sir. Always glad to be here. And today's very special because we're going to talk about my favorite book of the series that we're going through.
Absolutely. We always say like, "Ooh, it's a special episode. It's a special episode." I'm starting to be like conscious of that, but today is truly a special episode. I think this topic, and particularly this book and the insights from this book, probably came up in every single episode that you and I recorded, regardless of the topic. It's that universal. It's that applicable. And we both love that book. But I think you've been championing that even in our dynamic. So I really look forward to what we're going to look at today. I mean, I did take a peek, of course, of what you put together for this. And again, we had multiple touch points, but this is where really the insights from Never Split the Difference will culminate. I feel it will be a big one.
Yeah, I agree. And, so just some fun stuff about the book we're going to talk about, right? So first, it's my favorite. I'll talk about why it's my favorite. And then I'm going to just step through some of the core concepts that are in the book. And like, even just when I put the outline together, I was like, man, like it's so actionable. Like as soon as you see the heading, you're like, all right, I don't even need to listen. I got the gist of it. Thanks, Dave. But it's not me, it's Chris. This is all Chris's stuff. You should get the book. You should absolutely, patronize him. He's doing God's work as far as improving communication out there. But we'll talk about his negotiation tactics and how widely applicable they are, right? Just like Cialdini, right? So Cialdini's got like the human operating system, and everybody should do it just to exist on the planet with like other fellow humans, right? This guy's got a book that's basically at that same level where it's like understand the human operating system, but for a subset of scenarios. I'm going to highlight some of the tactics and how you basically instantaneously level up. Like of all the stuff we're going to cover, even my own stuff, my original synthesis, this is the one where you're going to like listen to the podcast or watch the video online, go back to whatever you were doing, and something will be different. It's that fast. And I'm not being hyperbolic. Wait when we get to the tips, I'll talk about it. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about. And then we'll tee up episode 4, which, yes, every episode is special, but episode 4 is your favorite book, right? Claps sell anything, pitch anything. So we've got 2 very special back-to-backs. So that's kind of the outline I put together for today. Anything you want to add before we disembark?
Just honestly giving a little bit more like props to Mr. Voss. So here's the book, Never Split the Difference. It's actually like, it's not especially short, but not a tome either. It's well written. It's pretty exciting. So actually remember first time I read it was the audiobook version. Very good listen, just like Pitch Anything. And in fact, my first deep dive into this, because I bought the book, I remember started listening, it was really good, but it inspired me so much that he has a piece on masterclass.com, right? I don't know if you know masterclass.com.
Yes, yep.
Oh, okay. Yep. So, you can learn music production from Hans Zimmer, and you can learn cooking from Gordon Ramsay and all that stuff. And I think it was also for Martin Scorsese. You can learn how to be a movie director. And when it comes to negotiation, Chris Voss is the man. And it's a 2-hour course. I don't know if they still have like a free trial or not, but not associated. I don't have a coupon code to give you either. But that was a really good course. I did it twice. It's 2 hours. It's very good content. Now, what you'll see is if you do that, that's great. It gives you a bunch of 80-20 insights, right? Again, super actionable. It's not just a buzzword. It's something that literally can bring into your next interaction. It will change things. It will still kind of justify you reading the book. And what we're going to do today is not just dive into those concepts, but we'll map it onto specifically the realm of data and analytics. Yep, right. So that will be the focal point.
Yeah. So I haven't taken the masterclass, but I have watched as much as I can find that he's put out on YouTube, and he does a couple different things on YouTube also. First of all, he's got awesome voice. Like,
Oh yeah.
I don't know if he does his own audiobook, but like listening to him, like you're just like, yes, like I'm at ease and I'm learning. He has that kind of voice that like bypasses your like psychological nervous system. So just like learning how to like orate the way he does, because he's very different than I am. In fact, trying to like match his energy might be the hardest thing in his repertoire. For me, I'm a bit more that like northeastern United States, high-strung, over-caffeinated person. But he also has this consulting group called the Black Swan Group, I think.
Yes,
I think that's what they're called. And they've put content online specifically about how to get better at selling. And there's a few people in his like inner circle, and they put out content as well. And I've never seen a bad video. Every single one, I learned something or it reinforces something I've already learned, and it's always a good use of time. Right? There's lots of stuff you could waste your time with on YouTube, but if you find Voss, Black Swan Group, anything that's affiliated with him, it's just constantly putting out incredible content. So we're going to talk specifically about the book, but like the brand around this man, this Chris Voss, is always worth looking at. So I can't say enough nice stuff. We could probably do a whole series just dedicated to why he's amazing, but just to like move into the book now, because that is the focus for today. This is the book that dethroned Cialdini for my number one recommendation to people when they're starting their career. I still think Cialdini is a good book, but this one is the only book that has eclipsed Cialdini in like read a page, get something out of it, go use it. Cialdini, highly actionable, especially the red version, but Voss, I think, has him beat by a hair. And the stuff that he covers also is literally unlocking blockers and stuff like that. But he also weaves it in with narratives from his time as a hostage negotiator. So you have this very interesting interplay between, there's a little bit of science sprinkled in, there's tactics that you can use, and then there's this narrative thread that he pulls through where you're like, oh, this isn't just some academic researcher. This is a guy who has literally saved lives with his mouth.
Like on the front lines, the actual front lines.
Exactly. It kind of reminded me, I read this book and I read Jocko's book, Extreme Ownership, relatively close together. Jocko has a similar kind of like, let me talk about some time in, I think, Fallujah was where he was stationed.
And Ramadi, as they...
Ramadi, that's the one.
In the audio book, like, like how the book opens. It's like...
Right. So you've got these like, okay, I was really in the military. I really did stuff. It was really like mattered. Oh, and here's the principles and the concepts that you can use yourself. So like that's a very interesting take on nonfiction. And it because it almost pulls it into the fictional area because it's like, wow, there's some like really cool stories here in addition to this highly actionable, highly effective content. So I can't say enough nice stuff about the book. I know you started to say some nice things about the book. Anything like, what do you want to add to?
So the only thing I'm going to add is you mentioned that he has a good voice. So this is something that I immediately implemented because he talks about the calming tone, which he says is the late night FM DJ voice, and like getting the late night FM DJ voice. And I started using that immediately, and I mean almost as a joke, right? And it works, right? So he's great. And by the way, we did not like really coordinate this. Just we want to give him props. Who knows? Maybe at some point we can bring him on the podcast. We'll see.
That'd be. I mean, we have to use all of these tactics to convince him that we're worth his time. That's what
exactly. That's what we're doing.
Yes, I'll call out the first one we'll use when we get there. All right. So the book has a very simple concept. Everything is a negotiation, and then the book tells you how to win at those negotiations. Right? Yeah, you would think, if I'm going to Starbucks to get a coffee, like that's a very transparent transaction. I want coffee. They want $5. We swap. We walk out. But he's like, no, even there might be some room to negotiate. So it encourages you to think about things as opportunities to negotiate. And even, the most banal interactions can potentially be negotiations. But he has these nuggets about how to get towards a win. And they are, emotional intelligence is important. We talked about that with Cialdini, right? It's going to be a common thread across all of the books, right? We feel and then we think. This concept of mirroring, which is a great way to tap into the liking bias that Cialdini talks about. It's a way to kind of algorithmically get yourself there. Labeling as a way to bring underlying things to the surface. And then he goes even further with the accusation audit, which is like, okay, here's the objection that's coming. Let me try to circumvent that, which is a great way to, sales training. You don't have to yes chain if you're able to do accusation audits. Using no-oriented questions to make progress. Spoiler alert, this is my absolute favorite part of the entire portfolio of insights here. Getting better at using open-ended questions. Listening for that's right instead of you're right. You're right means go away. That's right means we're making progress. The importance of having a how that goes along with the yes, because yes without a plan doesn't get you anything. And then finally, a reminder that you can walk away, and that preserves some of your autonomy. So Cialdini had 6 broad concepts with lots of sub-concepts. This one I think is more like 8. But each of these, they synergize well, and they're all very intuitive. So I think we're going to be able to do, 33% more tips in maybe even fewer minutes elapsed, depending on how long we gush about how awesome Voss is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And just like going through these as I see them structured, because he doesn't lead the book and say, hey, here are the 8 principles, like an influence. But it's definitely there. And it's kind of shocking to me that at this stage, no one ever produced a direct rundown and map it onto data analytics. Because even if you just look at this, it just screams that, okay, you can just use this so well. Because all those blockers that in data analytics, I'm sure we're going to talk about that, but in data analytics as a leader, you experience, it has to do with that. Okay, there's that emotional connection needs to be there, building the rapport, labeling feelings for people, because when it comes to data analytics and AI, a little bit of confusion, lack of understanding, apprehension, concern, like all these things is just so relevant. And then also driving things forward in a corporate environment when you actually need people to buy into whatever you're building, whatever you're selling. And just that stance, and just the fact that this doesn't exist, or if it exists, no one ever put it out there. I'm really excited about being able to fill that gap.
Yep. And as a data science executive / storyteller, this one came in huge handy as I made that transition from individual to executive as well. So I'll try to make sure I pepper in some of my own war stories, which are less interesting than the hostage negotiations, but sometimes they felt just as high stakes.
Also, just a quick note on the idea that everything is a negotiation, right? So when I actually heard about the book for the first time, Never Split the Difference, I kind of got the impression is, never split the difference, which means like you negotiate, you got to get that win. And in my mind, I always thought about these concepts as a zero-sum game. Right, that a negotiation will be about how can I get more value so that at the other person's expense. That's how negotiations were framed in my mind. And one of the big takeaways that I had after really immersing myself in this is that a successful negotiation is not about like getting you the most value, but getting both of you the most value. And I'm not even talking about like I'm not moralizing here. That's how you should drive negotiation. No. Successful negotiations, by definition, negotiation is successful if both of you got the most value out of it. And let's just look at, for example, the actual hostage negotiation situation. Now, in a hostage negotiation situation, the guy is already surrounded by cops, first of all, right? So at that stage, you have the person taking the hostages, you have the hostages themselves, and then you have everyone else involved, including the cops and the hostage negotiator themselves. If the hostage negotiator succeeds, everyone gets the most out of this, right? The guy in that position, he will get the best deal, probably. Right? He will get the best deal because he's not going anywhere. He's not going to get the car. He's not going to get, everyone knows he's not going to get the $2 million, in the bag. So in that sense, the negotiator has to keep the best interest of in that case, the guy who has the hostages. The hostages themselves, self-explanatory, we want them to stay alive. And that completely flipped my view on this is because by actually focusing on what is the attainable value in this dynamic right now, and then removing the emotional blockers on both sides, by the way, on both sides, that will actually yield the highest, best results for everyone involved. So it's not a zero-sum game, and I think it's just kind of important to lay that down and reiterate, because I also know that a lot of listeners who are a little bit icky about, negotiation and getting the win and all that, it comes from a misconception of what good negotiation is. So I just wanted to kind of mention that. I don't know if you have anything to add.
No, you made a bunch of good points there. The only thing I'd add was this. It comes from game theory, right? I want to say it's the tit for tat model, or like iterated games where you're going to keep playing, right? So like this is where you don't want to extract maximum value from one transaction because you want repeat transactions, right? Same thing with even today I'm doing analysis on like better pricing. All right. There are absolutely situations where you can, fleece somebody, but then you're never going to get business out of them again. So like you basically crush, you accelerate the lifetime value to this transaction. I might realize 15% of it when I might get 5%, but then I never get any more of it. So I've actually realized 100% of the lifetime value. And like that, there's a scene in what is it? Margin Call, where like Kevin Spacey's character is like, yeah, you can make the deals now, but you're never going to do business with these people again. And they're like, yeah, but we're going to survive today. So like that's, but that emphasis of like that dilemma of like, well, I want to do more business with this person, repeat. Otherwise I'm going to destroy my reputation. I'm going to take them to the cleaners and they're never going to want to work with me again. So it's like, yeah, I might win the day, but I'm going to drop my ceiling significantly. Voss helps to help us think in terms of those iterated games and the best and the longest relationship. Because, when you hear never split the difference, you think hostage negotiation. I went into it thinking like, okay, yeah, I can't settle for just the torso. So it has to be zero sum because I need the whole person back in one piece. I can't just say, you give me the torso, I'll give you a car. You don't get the money, but okay, I got half a person. So I was expecting hardline zero sum, almost like Machiavellian, and it's completely different from that. So that's a good point about the like change of perspective that happens depending on what your preconceived notions are.
Quick confession, I've never seen Margin Call, but this is like eerie that you just mentioned because for some reason it kept popping up in my YouTube feed, different scenes from it in the past 2 weeks. I don't know if is it worth watching?
It's a master class in drama and like good serious acting. So you've got like Jeremy Irons is ridiculously good in that movie. Spacey's good in it. The guy who voices Jarvis and Vision, I can't think of his Jack Gleason or something like that. He's in there. He does a great job. Like just everyone's like super good in their roles. Demi Moore, Stan Tucci, like everybody. So it's like awesome dialogues, awesome. Like they create a lot of tension, excellent pacing. And I think the reason why it's popping up in your algorithm is because here we are, February 2024, and there's a lot of like economic heartburn, fear of another 09, 08, or 07. I forgot exactly what year. Great recession happening, stuff like that. So people are probably tickling the algorithm, and the algorithm's surfacing it. But it's a great movie, just from like a white collar corporate drama type thing.
Okay, there you go. I just wrote that down. I have a 6-month-old at home, so probably I'll need to chop it up into like three different parts.
Yes, and it'll go over the 6-month-old's head, so like you can watch it. There's nothing like inappropriate for a 6-month-old. So
okay, great. Well, it's gonna be a family thing.
Yeah, there you go. All right, with that, speaking of laughter, I guess weird segue, but we're talking about let's get into Voss, right? So first thing he talks about emotional intelligence. We know that emotional intelligence is important. That's probably the number one lesson for the data storytellers. You're in analytics. We are left brain, I think, is the math side. So we're all just like facts. We've got the facts. We're empirical, numbers, right? And then we go engage with the business, and we're like, why won't those morons appreciate our empiricism, right? This, again, you've got to connect with the people. These people have motivations. These people have fears. These people have feelings, and you've got to tap into those, or you're just doing math for the sake of math. Now, that by itself is like, well, it's a forehead slapper. Who cares? Thank you. That's not profound. I'm not going to buy that book. But again, this is a very tactical book. It talks about how to get dialed in to this emotional intelligence right away. So like, whereas I don't think there's any shortage of people, messages that say it is important, not very many tell you how to do it. And I think as data and analytics professionals, we love algorithms. If you can algorithmatize, that's a word, stuff that's not comfortable, great. It's a recipe. I can follow it. And so he has a couple, right? So a few, again, very actionable, super usable. First, mirroring. Mirroring is essentially using the last few words that somebody says in their volley of words to you to start your volley of words back to them, right? Because if you think, if we're going to use the crude metaphor that a conversation is like a duel, right? You're essentially, whatever they push out, you're going to give it back to them to open, and then you're going to go work, advance what you were going to say or what you were going to do. And that builds relationship because it helps them feel heard, right? The power of paraphrasing. I mean, this one, I think they gave it to me in consulting training. They're like, listen, you're consulting, it's interviewing, you're going to be listening. Paraphrase before you move on to what you wanted to say. It's so powerful for someone to feel heard, right? You host podcasts like all the time. Like you know exactly like how energizing it can be for your counterpart to be like, wow, like Laz is hearing me. He's paraphrasing. He's magnifying some of my key points. It's like, yeah, man, you get this. It's great. Let's keep rocking, right? It's so simple, but again, it's doable. Like you just said 30 seconds worth of stuff to me. Let me play back what I think I heard. It sounds like what I'm hearing is, right? And work in some of those last few words. And then they're going to be like, wow, that's amazing. Like you're listening. You understand me. I'm basically budgeting 5 to 25% of my response to just recap your initial statement, right? And then he goes even further, avoid saying you or avoid opening with the word you because that might trigger defensiveness. I think Claff is great at talking about triggering defensiveness. That's probably like the biggest thing I took away from Claff. But like he talks about it here. If you said like you said a bunch of stuff to me and then I said, no, you sound nervous. Like you're gonna clam up and be like, I don't want to deal with this guy. Like this guy's trying to find my weaknesses. But if I said, oh, sounds like you may feel nervous, the word "you" is like buried in the sentence, right? It sounds like is like I'm just telling you what I thought I heard. It gives you a space to reflect, correct me. I might even say, hey, man, I might be the dummy here, but it sounded to me like this, you were nervous about this, or this is making you nervous. Even better, I buried the you even further, and then that makes room for you. So we're already, because of the way his book is written, like the tips kind of bleed into each other. But starting right out of the gates, emotional intelligence, number one. Oh, by the way, here's an algorithm to get there with his tactical empathy concept. So I just said a bunch of stuff. Why don't you mirror back, paraphrase, and then add some stuff from your own experience?
Adding some stuff,
yeah.
100%. So this is so good because, again, when we just look at all these books and all these concepts, sometimes it just encapsulating it in one word. What you said, triggering defenses. You and I have been talking about it a million times, but it just connected a lot of dots for me. And I feel like now I'm reflecting on my interactions with people but this is very important because once you internalize these concepts, it's not like you need to consciously deploy these little tactics, right? It becomes a part of your portfolio and arsenal, right? And I catch myself doing this, right? So while you were talking, I'm actually, whenever I'm in a conversation, first of all, if you're a busy professional, you have a lot going on in your world. So it's very useful for you to actually stay in that dialogue by repeating things. As you said, if you don't want to trigger a defense mechanism, burying the you or even getting rid of the you. So when you said, you sound nervous, instead, I feel like you might be nervous about it. Or even better, I feel like there might be some anxiety around this, right? You can completely remove the person, right? It's just like, okay, we're on the same page. And and this is so funny. I'm gonna say a little bit of an anecdote. Maybe I'm thinking on a family track a little bit with the 6-month-old, because with the 6-month-old now you have a bunch of new responsibilities, and if you were busy before, now you're super busy, right? And I catch myself not hearing what my wife tells me, right? Just because I have so much going on. And I told this to her that, hey, did you notice that in the past 2 months, I developed this thing whenever you tell me something, for example, can you get me the, the tissue from the top drawer, right? What I do immediately is like, tissue from the top drawer. I just repeat it, right? And first of all, it helps me to actually functionally listen and work with that concept to the highest of my ability in that particular moment. But also, it does suck a lot of tension out of the relationship, which should naturally emerge here, right? So incredibly useful. So the mirroring, what I found is when I started using it consciously, first of all, I just caught myself saying, thinking that, hey, first of all, I'm doing this a lot. And then one of my apprehensions were like, doesn't that sound inorganic? Because Voss actually says that, hey, don't overthink it. If literally repeat the last sentence, literally repeat the last 5 words. And I was like, does that sound organic? But try it. Literally just go into your next conversation and just try it. Repeat the last 3 words, repeat the last 5 words, and see how it feels. What you'll feel is that not only it doesn't feel awkward or manufactured, you will get like a little positive kick out of it. And if you develop that into a skill, you don't have to like make an effort to interject it. It will just elevate your communication in general. Like literally take this now, just take this one concept from this entire course. You got a measurable gain on the impact of your conversations.
I agree. And as you know, that's the concept with your wife, who already likes you, we hope, right?
Oh, yeah.
And is not threatened by your existence. Now take that and then move it into the data environment where oftentimes the analytics team is the other, right? Either they don't understand us, they don't trust us because they're like, well, why are you sniffing around my data? You may be, revealing inefficiencies that I live with, but I don't really want a spotlight on. Or even worse, in the AI era, oh, you're just trying to put me on the street. So imagine now they don't want you in the room. They don't like you. They're starting from a position of not liking you. And you have this stigma of the otherness, and you're able to use these to make those like micro deposits in the rapport bank. And all you're doing is algorithmically repeating words and paraphrasing so that they feel like, well, okay, they get me. One of the people I used to work with in my last role, there were 2 teams that they could go to for a lot of requests. We're a giant corporation, it happens. But she said to me, I come to you because you listen to what I'm trying. You understand what I'm trying to do, and you listen to me. And then you give me what I need. And I just, okay, there we go, right? So there's a reinforcement where, I'm the analytics, that's the business, but because they felt heard, then they trusted me and they would come to me when they needed stuff. So very, very simple. Sounds like apple pie Pollyannish, but no, like it works, and it works a lot in this analytic professional in the business context.
And might I just add one thought there that
please.
A lot of times, sorry, go ahead.
No, I said, please, get that. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So it just broke up for a second. Yeah. So a lot of times we hear that, as a data professional, listen, which is useful advice, by the way. Useful advice, right? But to get the most out of your listening, if you actually now made the effort, you know that you need to listen, you're actually trying and you're making an effort to listen, get the most bang for your buck by just using the simple thing that demonstrate the fact that you listened. Just take this as a concept. Listen and show that you actually did it.
Agree. Yes. And the paraphrasing is a great way to show that you're listening. Labeling is how you build on it. Right? So the second concept that we wanted to cover was labeling. So labeling is essentially pointing out and putting a word or words to the vague, amorphous kind of feeling that's knocking around the conversation. And, I would say as the like the internal consultant, which is the archetype I often picture myself in, I think one of the biggest challenges is just getting everybody to face the same direction, right? Getting everybody to agree, what is the underlying problem? What is the actual opportunity? Because you have this, especially the bigger organizations, they're siloed. So like you could imagine like, okay, well, the manufacturing person thinks that manufacturing is the key to unlocking infinite growth. The finance person thinks maybe it's an SG&A play. The HR person thinks we need more training. The marketing person's like, well, if only we could find the customers. So everybody has it's like the parable of the 4 blind men and the elephant. Like ultimately it's an elephant. Right? But then someone's grabbing the leg and like, oh, it's a tree trunk, and somebody's grabbing the ear and they're like, oh, it's a bat wing or whatever. I forgot exactly how it goes, but you get the point, right? So if you can label even with a one-on-one situation and get them to agree to what's underneath or what is driving it, like, hey, it sounds like the biggest opportunity here is operational efficiency. Right? Or it sounds like there's, like you said right earlier, it sounds like there's some anxiety around operations. Right? And I'm going to jump ahead, right? That's where you want to try to get the that's right out of everyone's mouth. Because then once everyone's standing and facing the same direction, like the execution clicks into place super quickly. But if you end up like, I'm solving this problem, but really it should have been this problem, but then you told me about this problem, like we end up with a lot of expensive analytic effort being exerted and then lackluster adoption from the business. You either have the action gap or they're just like, this isn't what I wanted, right? That's what you asked for. And so labeling helps to get everybody aligned, right? So like, I used to work supporting the team that dealt with our brokers, middlemen between us and the buyers. And there'd be this concept of like, okay, I need to know who my best brokers are. And like, you got to unpack the best. So it's like, well, it sounds like the best broker is the one that has the most room to grow, not necessarily the biggest in-force book of business. That's right. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to find the brokers with the most opportunity to grow. Okay, great. And then you can move into solutioning. But now you're solutioning for growth as opposed to solutioning for maintaining the book of business or something like that. So, the labeling helps get you to the problem you should be solving. And then you can bring the full force of the analytics to it. And then everyone's delighted and they start, singing your praises instead of burning you in effigy because you're very expensive time wasters. So that's labeling. And then even better, right, building on labeling, I club these together. I'm not sure if he would, but accusation audit is basically proactively labeling the thing that's going to upset the person. So and this one was a big change because there's a deep-seated human element where you try to negate the bad behavior, but in his case, he's like, just own it, right? And to give you an example, it's like, hey, this might sound greedy, but I need you to sponsor my flight to Toronto or something like that as a term and condition of working together. And then you're like, wow, shit, man, he did say it was going to sound greedy. He's just honest. He's an honest guy. I mean, whether or not you want to sponsor the flight to Canada is up to you, but at least I'm being honest. But if I was like, hey, I'm not a greedy guy, but I need you to pay for my flight to Canada. You're like, well, that's greedy, you liar, you filthy liar. Like this desire to minimize and cancel out. At best, you're a liar. At worst, you've introduced a fear that they didn't even know they had. So if you're like, hey, this might sound greedy, but I really need you to fly me out there. I can't do it myself. Completely different reaction. But then you're like, all right, well, he said he was greedy. He said all right. So it sounds this is the most counterintuitive thing in the whole book, but it actually does work. I was using this the other day. Hey, this might sound a little bit forward, but I need you to give me this content because I was asking for some logs. I need this data. This might sound like I'm invading your space, but I need this data so that I can ultimately get to the end. And they're like, well, he warned me it was going to be invasive, but I guess it's not that bad if we're going to get to the end of the project. So counterintuitive, but works. And that's like labeling on steroids. You're labeling the bad behavior, but you're getting in front of it, you're owning it, and then they're more likely to capitulate in the end.
And also, like, while we're talking about this, so what these tactics and tools do is it helps you to operate in that realm of the emotional. And whenever I hear people talk about emotional intelligence, again, most of the things that are being regurgitated, often gimmicky, often just, not really applicable, but this is emotional intelligence, because understanding how these interactions work on the emotional level, because what you're doing is you are preempting that negative emotional reaction. That's what's happening. So imagine, and I'm just thinking about these personal examples. When I was a teenager, I hated working out in like a massive yard, and there was a lot of work that needed to be done, and I always hated. And my dad asked my help, unfortunately. But I remember that how he asked also always triggered me emotionally, because always like, hey, look, it's just gonna be 5 minutes. It's just gonna be 5 minutes. And I was, But actually, when he said that, look, you'll hate it. It will suck. But I need you for 2 hours, right? And it turns out that it's only one. It was always like a better outcome, a better interaction, definitely better for the relationship too. And I started using this immediately because he recommends it with customer service, right? Hotels, the airlines. Often, when you come with an ask, these people do this all day and they're annoyed by all these requests, right? And he said, okay, you want late checkout in a hotel, right? It might be an inconvenience. They might need to make a few phone calls and all that. But if you go in saying that, you go down to reception and say, how can I help you, sir? And you say, look, you're going to hate me. And this might actually ruin your day. I'm going to be the most annoying person that you spoke to, but I need a late checkout. Now, what happens here is that this interaction actually has a positive emotional impact on the person, because they're like, phew, what again? I hate my job. I always have these people with the weirdest requests. What do I need to do now? Oh, it's just a late checkout. That's cool. And
yes.
Yeah, you see, so immediately by this is not labeling, but it's the same kind of
same
principle.
Energy.
Same energy. You just double down on the thing. You suck out and prevent the negative emotional reaction, and you turn it into a positive, right? Very counterintuitive. It's like, oh, are you kidding me? I need to walk up to someone and tell them that they will hate me, and then I will ruin their day. Yes, correct. Tactically, and a few seconds later, you're going to get the exact opposite. You're going to get a dopamine shot to kind of color your interaction with a positive emotional temperature.
Yes, it's almost like there was I forgot where I came across this, right? Because I agree with that whole thing about you kind of inflate the badness, because then you're going to ask for something minuscule and it almost adds levity to the interaction, right? It was something like, apologize for something that's out of your control. And people will be like, oh my God, it's so endearing. So if you're like, I'm sorry it's snowing today. They're like, oh, buddy, that's not your fault, man. But, I appreciate that. It's kind of like the same thing. Oh, you're going to hate me. Yeah. I need a late checkout. And then your story about the late checkout is great, because it also reinforces the point that he makes, which is everything's a negotiation. I mean, a hotel transaction is fairly mechanical. Come in. I even know, okay, got my license on my credit card in my hand. Let's just do this. Try to be cheerful I never want to be the worst interaction that someone has that day, especially in the service industry. But I know the drill. Hey, what's up? I'm here. Reservation under Coughlin. I have everything. It's so mechanical. It doesn't even occur to me hey, do you want to get a better room? Now's your chance to ask for a better room, right? Do you want to get the late checkout? Now's your chance to negotiate late checkout, right? But that's a perfect example. And so there's all these little opportunities, and even just being extra friendly at Dunkin' Donuts. You have any idea how many free munchkins I've gotten because I just ask how you're doing at the beginning of the transaction. I mean, I've gotten multiple 20-piece 10-packs for that. I mean, I don't certainly need the munchkins, but it's just an example of all these little opportunities to add a little sugar to the interaction, and there you go.
And I don't know if later on will we actually talk about real negotiation when it's like a price negotiation. I don't know if you had that planned, right? But in the, because maybe it's a good time to just kind of put it there, because it's exactly that principle. So in a price negotiation, and it kind of ties into the whole idea of, look, this is not a zero-sum game. So I do this with our vendors, and the vendors are welcome to listen right now to this conversation too, because I'm kind of wear it on my sleeves too. That's the beauty of these things, that you can wear it on your sleeves. You don't need to be. So a good negotiation is, let's say you have a service that you would want to buy from someone, and there's a price that you're willing to pay. That's a good deal for you, that you'll be happy with the deal. If I got that service for that price, I would be happy. Mind you, it's important for both you and your vendor that you're happy, okay? So that's because then they will get repeat business. You will be happy using their service. There will be no resentment building up. So it's important to understand, what kind of deal are you looking for? What kind of deal would you be happy with? Great. Once you have that price, it's prudent and skillful to now think about that whole negotiation process as a value generating process. And a part of it is that, hey, let us not squeeze ourselves right away in to the limit case of what I would be happy with, and put unnecessary pressure on this thing. Let's build a little bit of cushion. You know, he actually has the Ackerman technique, which is a concrete algorithm of how to negotiate. Probably won't have the bandwidth to dive into that. It's really cool. It's the 60%, and then you kind of work your way up with diminishing allowances, getting closer to what you want. But how it starts is, okay, I want this price. I would be happy with that price. Let me work my way back to, let's say, 60% of that. And just kind of anchor the negotiation. Of course, I want to get the best price too, but I know strategically that this will yield the best outcome for the relationship. Because look, if they can't give it to me at that price, they're not gonna give it to me at that price, right? So in this, how you start is by saying that, okay, look, we looked at the service, I looked at our budget and our plans. Now I'm gonna tell you a price that you will hate me for. You know, it's a ridiculous price. You know, it's comical. You've never heard such a ridiculous proposition, but here it goes, right? So, but just by starting that way too, you will start on a positive tone, because whatever you're going to come up with, I mean, again, the goal here is to get a good deal that's good for both of you. So, not going to say 10% of that price. It's not going to be insulting, right? But by front loading it that way, I remember like a previous office at WeWork. I did this. I liked the office. It was pricey, right? I talked to my co-founder. We looked at our budget, and I was like, look, if we could get it at that price, that'll be awesome. And I have no idea actually whether they really need a tenant right now. I don't know about their pricing strategy. I don't know if they anchor super high. So let's just go really low. I talked to the negotiator on their side and said, you're going to hate me. And the first thing she said that, oh, I don't hate you. I don't hate you. The price is not that scary. Right. So because I said, look, I'm going to tell you a price that you will hate me for, probably sounds ridiculous and scary and all that. And immediately she said, no, I don't hate you. The price is not outlandish, and we started the negotiation there. And guess what? We had a beautiful relationship where we gave them great value back as well. So I just wanted to kind of mention that, because I don't know if we're going to talk about the negotiation specifically later on. And this principle just works so well that whenever you start,
it's a good point. A very good point. Yeah, and I actually hadn't thought about the actual negotiation at all. It was a blind spot coming in. I was thinking very much from like the political I'm the analytics department. You're not the analytics department. You're the business. So everything was there. So definitely appreciate you plugging the blind spot on that one with the pricing example, because
it's the same principle, right? So
yeah, exactly. Good plug. Real good plug. All right, now continuing to move through the content, my favorite tip, by far my favorite tip, the tip that I catch people using it against me, and I'm like, how dare you attempt this judo against me? This is the using no to move forward. I think this is like a whole chapter in this book. Like, this is such an amazing tip. He's got a great anecdote where He says he thought he killed Jack Welch with a question that scrambled his brain and triggered a stroke. But we'll get to but before we get to the anecdote, let's talk about the question, the technique. So we talked last week about the consistency bias and how it's got a bit of you have to temper that the way you use it in a corporate setting, because you don't want to be the guy who's yes chaining your counterparties because they get resentful. We all have this innate like yuckiness about getting yes chained. It feels like we're being manipulated, right? And he goes even further. Like, yes is actually kind of scary and uncomfortable to say, but no feels great. It's empowering. I said no to it, right? I said no. I basically turned it away. So why not ask a question in a way where no moves me forward? And you're like, what the hell does that even mean? Well, it starts with questions like, would you be opposed? Would it be crazy? Is it unreasonable? Is it out of the question? Things like that. Is this a bad time? Right? All I've done, so if I want you to say, hey, like, lad, can we order pizza for the intermission or something like that? I'm asking, can we order pizza? So I need a yes from you, right? And now you're thinking, you're like, oh shit, man, I was kind of in the mood for wings. Like, do I really want pizza? Like, New Year's resolution, trying to lose 10 pounds. Like, all these different things might be running through your head. And you're like, well, who's paying for the pizza, right? Like, all these different things. Because I'm trying to get the yes out, and the yes, you're like, yes, right? Or maybe you'll give me sure, which is a yes flavored no, like all of those different things, right? But if I say, hey, lads, would you be opposed to pizza during the break? You're like, well, no. I mean, deep down inside, I'm not really opposed to the concept of pizza, right? So I got you to say no, and now we have pizza, which was my initial intent the entire time. Okay, it sounds contrived in this example of pizza, but like this is how easily you can use it. Tonight, dinner. Hey, would you be opposed to steak for dinner? Ask your wife. Hey, would you be opposed to steak? I mean, probably not, right? Like, why would you? I hate steak. But that's the great part about starting from no, is that if you do get one of those yeses, which people don't really want to give you, that's you're in the danger zone, right? If you're like, hey, would you be opposed to steak? Yeah, I'm opposed to steak. Like, okay. Right.
Good to know. It's good to know. That's very valuable piece of information.
Yeah, we're going, right? So, and like the example that he uses is like, you're trying to call somebody, hey, is this a bad time? If you go, no, it's not a bad time. Oh, wonderful. I love hearing no. That got me forward. Now I can talk to you. As opposed to,
do you have 5 minutes?
Is this a bad time?
Which is,
yes.
Like, I never have 5 minutes. No one has 5 minutes.
Right. So now you're a liar. Right? Or is this a bad time? Yes. I'll call you tomorrow. Like, you just get out of the danger zone.
Yeah, yes.
So like this is such, and like you use it in emails to people that, hey, would you be? I just asked my boss, like, hey, would you be opposed to sending some of my team to a conference? Well, no, I'm not opposed to that. Okay, great. They're going to the conference. Right? So it's like, ask the no-oriented question. It helps you actually move forward. And then the Jack Welch story was, he goes up to Jack Welch. Jack Welch is like doing a book signing or something. He goes, hey, would it be crazy if you spoke at my MBA class? And he said Jack Welch was like, because he's like processing the question. He thought he killed Jack Welch, because Jack Welch has got to be like in his 80s or something at this point. And yeah, so I adore this tip. I cannot tell you how fast I would buy the book just for this tip. Like that enough. You mentioned like the labeling. No, I'm sorry. It was the emotional intelligence, where it's like you're getting demonstrably better. This one right here, put this in your quiver. That's it, dude. Like, you will immediately start to make progress on things that were originally intractable just by making the no-oriented question be your lead blocker.
100%. And it's funny because I never had a conversation about this specifically with someone. This is the first time, right? So, like, about these concepts. So not only have we spoke about this many, many times, we're literally doing like a dissection of this. when you were asking those questions, just as an example, right? I mean, we're not even in the same country right now. We're definitely not getting pizza today together, unfortunately. When you were asking the question, like, hey, can we get some pizza? Now, because in my business and in my, leading a business or being a parent, you get these questions all the time. Can I get it? Can I get it? Can I get it? So I do have such a deep wired emotional reaction to it that when you ask me, can we get pizza? I felt that there was a negative, and I know it's a fake scenario, right? But I still get the negative kick. And when you said, would you be opposed? I'm not kidding. I felt like a little bit of a like warm feeling of no, I'm not opposed. And it's just like, because I'm constantly besieged by the request of can we get, and it's a constant. And pay attention to this when you talk to a senior business executive. How many times people come to them? Can I get this? Can we get this? And they always are against limited resources of time, of money. So they are instantly on the defense when you ask something like this. And there's so few situations when these people can feel safe of saying no. Right? Because again, if you're a senior business leader, if you're a parent, how many times do you have the luxury to say no? Saying no is a very difficult thing, right? So here you offer them a situation when they can feel comfortable about it. And what you said, I think it's almost underrated that these tactics, also labeling, it's your main intelligence gathering tool. It's better than asking a question almost, because it reveals the truth, right? Unfiltered. Because if someone says that would you be opposed? Yes, they are opposed. Whoa, like that is something that's real. And it's something that you really need to take seriously. Same with labeling. You label something and someone corrects you, and they will, because it's also like, hey, it feels like, or it sounds like, and they said, oh yeah, you're right, but, or no, actually. And people will do that all the time. That's real information, real intelligence for you, right? I actually wanted to mention it, but I forgot, but it's a great kind of plug.
I forgot too. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. I'm so glad that you brought that up, because now that we're here and you've mentioned, I was like, oh my God, that's like one of the key components of labeling. That's why people listening to this have to buy the book, because we can't just read the book to them right now.
That next episode, 7 hours just going through the book. Would be a worthwhile endeavor too.
Right. But you're right. When they correct a mislabel, now you've gotten to the truth. Yeah, same thing with like, would you be opposed? Yes, I'm opposed. Oh, okay. We can't even solve that problem. We got to solve the first problem, which is get your alignment. So yeah, I love that idea of like this pulls the information out.
Exactly. And mine I add, and I rarely add this caveat, but it's just something to keep in mind that usually with these tools, people feel uncomfortable using them. And when you actually deploy it, it just works so well in all situations. With this one, it's true. 100% true, but this was the only thing that I noticed with salespeople approaching me, and even in an email saying that, would it be unreasonable to set up a 15-minute call, right? Because it was kind of manufactured and almost like out of context. Maybe I'm also like primed because I know about the tactic. That always gave like a negative emotional reaction. Just something to keep in mind. Now, again, I also feel like that whenever I tried to do this, and maybe I'm also like just by my personality, I'm hypersensitive to these things. It's very hard for me to actually plug it in when it feels inorganic. But most situations you can, right? But just with this, try not to like force it in. Don't try to like put like a square peg into a round hole. There will be many, many opportunities when this presents itself as just simply the best way to ask for something. So I just wanted to kind of add that caveat, more like a fun fact that this is the only thing I actually noticed from specifically salespeople, and also the fact that I'm noticing and it evokes a negative emotional reaction from me also shows that probably they're not skilled either, right? But just kind of a note.
It's a good point about skill. But I do want to add to the caveat, because I made the joke about like when people do this to me, I'm like, how dare you? It's kind of like that. I'm going to throw another pop culture reference at you, but like in Harry Potter, when he cast was like Sectum Sempra on Snape, and Snape's like, what are you doing, bro? I made that spell. I invented that spell. How dare you? Right? So like, but here's the thing though, and you're right. If it's inelegant, if it's ham-fisted, like it will trigger your immune system. But a caveat to your caveat. If you're being honest, you're probably not opposed. So it's like, or maybe it's not unreasonable. So at the same time, even though you know it's coming, right? And you're like, how dare you? Like, I get it, man. Like, you're using the Voss book against me, right? But at the same time, you're like, you know what though? I'm not opposed to it, so let's do it. You're like, so like, even though, so that's one where like, even if they know it's coming, and they're like, all right, I read Voss too, buddy. You can't pull the wool over my eye. I mean, it's not 100% failure rate, because there's that like honesty bias or that desire to be honest, and like, you know, at the end of the day, like, no, I don't think it's unreasonable. I'm not opposed to it. I'll take the sales call. Like, you know, so maybe I'm a pushover, right? But that, even when I see it happening, I'm like, you know, I'll give it to you, man. I'm not actually deep down, I'm not actually upset. So let's go do the next.
This is such a good point, and I'm glad that we got to that insight by, you know, you caveating my caveat, because now that you said it, so true.
Are you gonna do a triple caveat? It's just caveats all the way down.
Might add caveat to a caveat to my caveat. So essentially, what happens here is that it's one of those. It's not a zero-sum game. Hey, either I'm going to succeed on the emotional dimension or the logical. No, this is a tool that just knocks it out of the park on both, because emotionally you set yourself up positively, even if for whatever reason it's just not the right day, it's just not the right moment, it falls a little flat. On the logical level, it will still work, and it's so true. And I'm just having this kind of epiphany here, because what you're exposing is, hey, is it actually unreasonable to have a 15-minute call about this? Because look, if it is, probably you wouldn't have said yes either, even if it's emotionally fuzzy, right? Because again, okay, yeah, cool, well, we're in email, but we don't need this. I don't have 15 minutes, right? But if it logically makes sense, this will expose it. And this is what you're also doing. Like, a lot of these times, these communication techniques is revealing something to the other person that is true, that they are not aware of or not conscious of. That's also what good communication is. So this is so true, that, you know, this kind of labeling and both for the mirroring or asking a question that people can say no, we get closer to the truth. So essential.
Agree. And like your point about asking like good questions that help reveal the truth also plays great into, again, all of his things mesh together, because the calibrated questions is basically the next thing that we wanted to talk about. So he describes calibrated questions as questions that are open-ended. How, what, when, help me understand something, right? And this is like so there's like levels to this one too, right? Because just like with the use no, there's like this, okay, at first, like, I know you're doing it, so I'm mad, but then really it's okay. So this same thing with the calibrated question. So the level one way of thinking about this is it's just an encouragement to ask open-ended questions, right? Especially this one, speaking as an executive, this is so important, because we, in hierarchical, like higher positions in the hierarchy, right? We can use yes/no questions to essentially like Socratic method our way to the destination without being like autocratic or like a dictator. So it helps to avoid being just this like bossy leader who's like, no, you will do it this way. With declarative statements, you're using inquisitive ones, but because you're using yes, no, you've essentially put them on rails. Anybody with, you know, more than 10 minutes of experience or an IQ north of 100 is going to realize you've just put them on rails. So it does build resentment, but it also shuts off conversation, right? Like, you know, I've been mentoring people for a long time, and if I catch myself using yes, no's, I'm trying to insert my agenda onto them. But if I say, hey, what were you thinking when you did that? That might not be the right way to phrase, because what are you thinking sounds insulting. But like, what was your motivation? Like, what was your thought process? Like, help me understand what you were going for, because that'll elucidate a whole bunch of stuff that you could never get out with yes, no. And so with customers too, it's the same thing. Like, oh, you know, would you benefit from a model that predicts price? Well, yes. Like, that's a stupid question. Why are you even asking? Of course I want a better price. Okay, how would you use a tool that gave you pricing recommendation? Oh man, all the whole cornucopia of stuff opens up, and now you're like, oh, I just identified like 4 use cases. Oh, and by the way, the pricing model is the third thing we should work on. So just forget about negotiations, forget about labeling, forget about trying to surface. Oh, this is a surfacing technique, but just getting out of the yes nos is a huge leap forward. Right? Even when we're talking to each other, like I'm not saying like, well, like, Les, have you ever seen that before? Because then you're like, yes, okay, I've basically ended the conversation. I'm not inviting you to engage. We would have done the whole thing in 10 minutes. Instead, it's like, hey, it's like, tell me about how you've seen this. How have you encountered this? Right? Same thing. So being a good, conversationalist, a good communicator is about getting away from essentially locking things in. Now, there's a place for yes, no. If you're trying to like move through something and get something done, you can't, oh, tell me how you feel about the color of the background. No, it's too open-ended. It's more like, would you be opposed to a blue background? No, great, the background's blue. Would you be opposed to using a serif's font? No, okay, great, we're using Times New Roman, right? So like, there's places for these things to help move forward, but at the same time, I even like yesterday, I was working with my team, and I was like, wait a minute, let me stop asking you yes, no questions. Let me open it up. I mean, what about you? I mean, I'm going to literally do it right now. Watch everyone at home. Like, oh, you're doing it. What do you think? As a podcast host, this has to be like one of your most precious techniques, right? So, like, what do you think? Like, what's your experience here?
So, just from the podcasting, because you're asking about it. Now that I reflect on it, because I never had like a playbook for podcasting. Honestly, I remember the first ones we did in 2014 or something. Then I had like an initial outline of questions, but I was notorious for just deviating from it very early. But yeah, yes, no questions are non-existent because obviously it's about like creating an organic flow. And now I remember, okay, so thinking about London, our time in London, I remember I had a friend, a very good friend, and a brilliant guy, intelligent guy, but he was not really like good in social interactions. And he actually asked, hey, I'm going on a date. And I'm going on a date. Like, what is your recommendation? Now, with these things, you can talk about a million different things. But especially with someone who's like logically minded, just give them something easy that they can follow. And that was my recommendation of just use open-ended questions. Just use open-ended questions because that will, by definition, let the conversation flow. So that's a big trap, actually, in communications, that you shut it down. Now, as you said, sometimes you just need to kind of drive momentum. And might I adhere to that? And this is the yes tracking that we talked about. That when, for example, in a sales conversation, I keep hearing, "Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Does that make sense?" I hate it, But there's a time for does that make sense? When you actually want to know, hey. Like, does it actually make sense to you what I just said, and then move on? But absolutely, with these open-ended questions too, calibrated questions, this is like ground zero for stakeholder relationship building. Just again, enter into a relationship, not talking about the tech that you're building, to kind of open things up to actually get to the truth. Just these open-ended questions are the number one tool. Now, when you were pointing things out there about, for example, help me understand. So I'm catching myself because one of the most difficult conversational tracks are sometimes people that you love the most and you work closely with. But if you're attempting something ambitious, by definition, there can be like tension there, which is just a natural part of it, right? And something that I haven't been doing well, and I need to, and still need to work on it, but I did a lot of work on it consciously based on these principles of emotional intelligence, is that sometimes, like, especially like I love to operate in thought experiments, and I just jump into a thought experiment without even communicating that this is it. And I live in that situation as we're having the conversation. A lot of times it's like, but how are we going to do this, right? And I'm actually looking for a solution there. I want to understand how are we going to achieve this. I'm looking for the step-by-step thing. I'm excited about doing it, but it comes across as I'm being defensive. I'm trying to torpedo the thing, right? How are we going to do this? How are we going to do this? And it was so funny that actually with my co-founder once, like he actually like repeated it as like, oh, you're saying like, how are we going to do this? And I'm like, how dare you? But at the same time, but that's exactly what I just did. That's exactly what I just did. And I get it. Like I'm coming from a different place. There's a miscommunication here. The gap is actually, I'm not being skillful. I'm not being skillful, but a skillful way would be, oh, okay, fantastic. Now let's just help me understand how you see us doing X, Y, and Z. I'm asking the same thing. I have the same intention, but one delivery is without skill, and it will prompt a horrible emotional reaction. It will sidetrack the conversation. It will piss you both off, right? And your time is precious. You will not get where you want to be. The only difference, I'm asking the same thing, a little bit of a calibration there, and the opposite effect will emerge because I will have everything packed in there. You know, it will communicate that I'm listening. It will communicate that I'm on the same side. You know, I'm looking in the same direction. And now I just actually want more. Now I want to understand the actual steps going into it. You see, it's like such a world of difference.
Yeah, and you know what I like about what you're saying with like to help me understand is it's also implicitly, if not somewhat explicitly, humble.
Oh yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Because if you're like, how are we going to do that, or how are you going to do that? It's like you're creating, whether it's artificial or you're just magnifying a real hierarchy. Like, no, okay, fine, give me the answer there, whiz kid. But if you're like, oh, help me understand how we're going to get there, it's like, well, I can't see your, like, you have something, I'm sure, that I don't know. I'm admitting that I don't know. Like, please help me understand so that I can close the gap. Because right now I'm the dumb one. And if you read like Robert Greene, even, you know, or Machiavelli, like, you know, they do encourage this, like, play dumb so that, you know, but they're doing it from a nefarious point of view.
Yeah.
But I use it all the time because, like, the thing I use as the analytics guys is like, listen, yes, I have like fairly good academic credentials. Yes, I do fairly exotic, difficult mathematical things. But I am infinitely stupid compared to you in the business area that you have chosen to specialize in. So I always couch my questions with like, well, okay, like, I'm an idiot in your world, right? Help me understand how it works. How, like, you know, I'm seeing this, like, is this real? Like, we just had a, right off the presses, right? We were doing something about lifetime value, and we're like, we keep cutting this data and getting the same answer, and it just like beggars belief. It looks like on average, we only get 6 months of time with the people that we staff. And they're like, that is 100% wrong. You're missing some nuance in the data, right? But I'm like, great. I positioned it as like a question that helped me understand, not like I crunched the numbers 3 times and you've got a problem, because that would have made me look like an idiot and they would have laughed me out the room. But instead I'm like, I keep getting this answer, but even like naively, I don't think it's right. Can you help me understand? Like, or like, how does this match your experience? Or like, what do you think I'm missing? Right? And we got the answer. And no hard feelings and no loss of credibility, because, like, again, analytics, credibility is king. I lose credibility. No one trusts my models. No one trusts my analyses. So we're able to be wrong, like visibly wrong, position it with calibrating questions, and then walk away with better analytics, reputation unscathed. Probably more rapport, because they're like, oh, these guys are like, you know, walking around with, you know, 160 IQs, and they come to us, they trust us, they're asking us, they're not telling us. So another great way to use these is just, again, we're building rapport with each other. And your point about triggering defensiveness, which I want to like make sure that we don't leave this section without calling out. Like we've used words. What words are we using? What? How, when, help me understand. What have we not said? What is an open-ended question word? I'm literally asking you right now. Right?
Okay.
What do you think of? Like, it's a question word. It will unlock open. It's open-ended, but we're not using it.
Is it why? I don't know.
Yes, exactly. It's exactly the one.
Okay. Yeah.
Why is like the hardest one to not use, and then that's because it does trigger defensiveness.
Right? True. Why I was also hesitating, because I was like, it must be why, but I haven't had this insight before. It's so true, you know. And this is when okay, whatever style you have in communication, because some people are kind of more timid, more chill, more humble naturally. Some people are higher temperature and all that, but both can come with the best of intentions. And I kind of put myself in that category, that I'm just like to be, have these situations play out as a thought experiment, a higher temperature. That's just how I operate. And sometimes it's great, because it kind of infuses the situation with energy, but a lot of times it just blows up in my face. And this is the same scenario that I brought up. Is like, when I say, so I could say, literally I could say that there's no way we can do it this way, right? And I say it with this tone, right? And honestly, all I'm looking for is like, okay, cool, now we're gonna kind of hash out how it can happen. I'm coming with good intentions, but obviously it will be like people feel attacked and all that. Even if I turn down the temperature a little bit and I say, like, oh, why are we doing it this way? Or how are we going to do it, right? Even that can sound a little bit more like, hey, you're skeptical here, just trying to torpedo the thing. And you can turn it down all the way to, oh, just help me understand. So if you're a more like lower temperature, more humble, more timid communicator, this is definitely an area where you can double down on that, right? Just lean into it, own it, operate from there. If you're like a more energetic, more aggressive communicator, and a lot of times this is called for, and it's positive, in these cases, just see how it sometimes sabotages your interactions, and it comes across too confrontational and won't get you what you want. That's the most important thing there, right? It will absolutely stifle and suffocate these collaborations.
Agreed. And yet, to build on that a little bit, right? So you mentioned like the more deferential approach, where you're going to help me understand how, what, when, like those open-ended questions, like lean into it. And then we talked about the higher temperature people, where like they might lead with a why, right? But that's when you are afraid of triggering defensiveness. You don't want to lay on the why. You want to lean on the more open-ended stuff. But Voss also talks about there's plenty of places where the why and the defensiveness is advantageous. So like, why did you choose to partner with data storytellers? Now they're defending their decision to like you to you, and then they're basically just like burrowing into I like these guys mindset. So I was like, why did you choose AWS? If I work for AWS, hell yeah, I'm going to ask them why they like AWS. If I work for Google, I'm not going to say, why did you pick AWS? I'm like, oh, what do you like about AWS? Right?
I never thought about this. It's so cool.
Yeah, ask your wife, why did you say yes to my date? Just get a little dopamine, right? Oh, okay, that's why she likes me. And then like that allows you to flip between the two temperatures, right? So you may have that high temperature, you may have that high energy, and if you need somebody to like agree with you, it's kind of like in the cartoons, or like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, where it's like, you want to drink, I don't want to drink. And then he switches it, and then Roger Rabbit's like, all right, when I say I want to drink, give me a drink. And then he drinks it, right? Same thing here. So like being able to flip temperature. So you have a disposition that's like, I'm going to be a little bit more bullish. Then I need to remind myself to pull it back and use open-ended questions when I'm afraid to transgress. But if you're like, I'm rallying the troops behind me because, I'm out in front, I'm going to use that high temperature approach because I'm basically going to rally them behind me. And then vice versa. If you're more laid back and you're more of like a deferential, more passive communicator, you can do this. You're going to build rapport when you're in that I don't want to transgress mode. But then when it's time to rally, like there's a gear that you can flip into. You could turn up the temperature. That might be uncomfortable for them, but now you're rallying the troops before you go make the big charge. So I think like your concept like that you introduced about the temperature, I think this tip has something for both ends of the spectrum where you can kind of like switch it up as needed.
So good, because especially with strategy conversations or implementation of something, obviously it's never perfect, right? So doubt creeps in, things might not go as well. And just to kind of come back on the same page of why we're doing it in the first place, right? Or think about like managing your people. Remember, like, why did you join this role in the first place, right? And okay, now we can go back. First of all, again, we can solidify ourselves in where we kind of shared an understanding, where we started something together. It will also, in a very positive way, expose if we're deviating from that, right? So again, information, it gets us closer to the objective truth, and it has that kind of emotional element too, and introduces and re-solidifies that clarity that we might have had previously. So it gives you that solid footing when things start to shift and slip, which inevitably, again, if you're working on something worthwhile, that's just the nature of the game. So I love that. Again, I never had that insight in there.
Yeah, Voss makes that very eloquently. Now it might actually be in his live content. I'm not entirely sure if it's in the book.
Or I might just forgot about it. Like it might have just been one of those tools that just blew past me. So it's really good to.
Again, the book's packed with them. Yeah.
Yeah. No, really good stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of neat. Like we both read the same book, but like the stuff that I'm walking around with between my ears every day, and the stuff that you're walking around with. Right, there's a lot of overlap, but there's also just like complementary things. So that's why it's a 2-man show instead of just talking head.
Yeah, 100%. This is like if I did a book review on my own, there's no way just I'm getting to those insights.
Yeah, and we sort of just did this a couple times already in the conversation, so we don't want to belabor it. But like he calls out the green light, right? This concept of hearing the phrase "that's right." And it's going to hang off of lots of stuff, right? So we talked about labeling, we talked about EQ, we talked about, calibrated questions, using no to get to all these different things. And like as we're talking to each other and we're just kind of like vibing and going deeper, I said it or you said it, that's right, or 100%, or other synonyms for that. And that's really like all the tumblers clicking on the lock so that you can open the door. Because he does this really interesting contrast between that's right, which is agreement to the objective facts. Now everyone's facing in the same direction, big for labeling, and you're right. You're right appeals to your ego, but you're right is a false concession to get you to shut up and go away. So if you start going on and on and on, and this is not even like malicious, it's not like I'm trying to manipulate you out the door, but if I hit you with you're right, I'm somewhere in my operating system, I just want the exchange to be over, right? And so like when you're in these business settings, if someone's like, you're right, they're probably like trying to wrap up the meeting, trying to just get you to quit yapping because you're in some sort of a discussion and they're like, this is pointless. I want to go get my lunch or I want my next coffee. Like, let me just tell him he's right. And then that's going to feel like a yes. So he'll be satisfied. There's no implementation. There's no skin in the game. I'm just going to end this and walk away. But if you see like our discussion, which has been very productive, we're just throwing that's right back and forth, right, 100%. Yeah, exactly. So that little different. I've been burned in corporate settings by your right so many times. Like I can't even I was struggling for anecdotes, but I know it's happened because like I used to have, I don't want to say like rival executives because that's like too dramatic, but so like soft internal competitors because we're all sort of playing with a similar toolkit. We're all trying to achieve similar goals. And, while a lot of negotiations are not zero sum, a lot of corporate budgets are. So there's like a little bit of internal tension and you're right. Oh, wonderful. I'm right. Hang up the phone, walk away. 2 weeks later, zero progress. And I'm like, oh no, like I've just lost.
They said I was right. They said I was right.
I was like, shout.
That's so cool.
I had a partner that I used to work with when I was consulting, and he used to say that. And this is before I read Voss. And it was always I was like, oh, I didn't realize that there was like something like my lizard brain or my croc brain was like, oh, we can keep going. Like he's happy. But I didn't know the gravity of that phrase until a couple of years later when I finally read the book. So the you're right to dismiss you and the that's right to signal agreement is such a subtle thing. But it's another one of the, please make sure you take this from the book because it's so valuable. And I know you were trying to jump in there, and I kept going, so I apologize. I'll let you get in.
No. It's because it's just on the same idea. So now I see that the difference between that's right and you're right is mainly like it's an indication of a lack of engagement now, and
good
whatever.
Point.
Yeah, and whatever optimum emotional temperature and shared understanding we had, now we're starting to deviate from that. So I always see it as like a sign of a highway exit. You know, if you see that sign, you're right. Just make sure that you like stay in the middle lane. I don't know, probably an analogy will break down somewhere, but you want to stay in the that's right zone, and you want to stay out of the you're right zone. Or it just, it indicates that maybe you belabor a point, maybe it's something's a little bit off, because a lot of times, again, emotional intelligence, it's about just understanding what's happening, right? And this is a very concrete thing that you can look for. That's fantastic.
No, your point about the highway, like, I think the metaphor did get away, but you're right. Like, that's the off ramp. Like, that's the sign for the, like, okay, you've gone too far. Like, you've probably driven past an off ramp before. You're like, oh, that was my exit. So that's probably the conversation. Like, to take that analogy and then like try this. I love it. Right. There was some sort of like emotional resonance with the meta. I can't let it get away from us. We must make this work.
I'm sticking to it and I stand by it. It's a hill I'm willing to die on.
Yes, I think you're right is the conversational equivalent of driving past your exit. And I think with like analytic stuff, like, I don't know, I've shown up to meetings. I got 10 bullets to support my conclusion, and I'm reading all 10 of these come hell or high water. So like, there's definitely that risk of belaboring. I forgot belaboring is a reason why it would happen. Now, listen, you're right. Why are we talking about it? You're on bullet 4 of 10. Shut up. You've made your point. But you're like, I prepped for this. Damn it. You're going to hear all of my analytic findings. So but your point about it being the equivalent of passing your exit is probably exactly right. And then your point about emotional intelligence is about kind of riding that middle, because if you go too far this way, they're like, you're right, they want it to end. And then you go too far this way, they might try to end it in a more mean-spirited way. But as long as you stay in the middle, you're moving towards the goal. So I think that's right too. And there we go. You're doing it again. So
you hijacked my analogy of the highway. So I would love if I could say you're right, but that's just right objectively. So.
Oh man. Now if it slips out, because in a non-malicious way, if we just, oh yeah, you're right. Anytime from now to the end of the podcast, that's it. Like, they're like, oh, these guys, time to wrap it up.
They're not eating their own medicine.
Yes, the chemistry is deteriorating, but luckily we don't have very much left for today. So this one that we're going to cover next is called Yes Without a How is Worthless. And it's my second favorite tip. And the reason why it's my second favorite tip was this was the cure to my biggest blocker as a leader in a business where I had internal competition of some flavor. Okay? Because there were places where we had the peanut butter and they had the chocolate, and the business needed Reese's cups. They were not going to get by with just peanut butter. They were not going to get by with just chocolate. They needed integration. They needed partnership. However, there is, again, the budget was zero sum. The prestige was zero sum. The ability to get the next project, which is a single team project, was somewhat zero sum. And that was just a microcosm that I was operating in. The company had a cultural reputation among consultants that worked with us, among people that were in the company and left the company, and it was called NICE. I'm not going to name the company. I'm just going to say NICE, being nice. Okay? And being nice is when everybody says yes in the meeting and nothing happens as soon as you hang up the phone. Okay? That is yes without a how. And I couldn't put my finger on it. In my mind, it was people aren't accountable. People say yes, but they're not accountable. There's some sort of an executional gap. There's an accountability gap. There's an ownership gap. Like, they're bad people, blah, blah, blah. Wrong mindset. It was so I took the ownership and said, no, I need to get the how going before we get off the phone. I need to get the how going as soon as I get the yes. I cannot just stop at yes. I have to get the how. And then taking his advice and bringing it into the data storyteller's world and combining it with Cialdini. So this is going to be a little bit of a stealing the thunder from the synthesis portions of the series. As the data team, the analytics team, often we must drive the how forward. Because at the end of the day, they can't fire the business, but they can look at us as vestigial cost centers that take money but provide no value, right? Like think about I work in sales analytics. They're not going to fire the sales team because the sales team didn't use my data science widget. They're going to fire me because I made a useless data science widget. So it's incumbent upon the analytics people to drive it all the way through, to get the adoption, to get it baked into the core processes so you have that sustained adoption, that sustained utilization. Or if you're going to do a combination, like the analytics part is the most, one of the most fragile, because like a company can, in theory, operate, not well, but operate without it. It's not like it's finance. It's not like it's HR, right? If you cleaved off the HR department, you'd have a serious problem. You cleaved off the finance department, you'd have a serious problem. If you cleaved off the analytics department, yeah, you'd be a little bit more ignorant and you'd be a little bit more inefficient, but like the company didn't go out of business because it didn't have an analytics department. I mean, there was decades of business before the analytics departments were normal. So like the how is incumbent on us most of the time. I won't say 100% of the time, but most of the time. And then going even further, now bringing the Cialdini. Consistency bias and social proof are great ways to take the how from Voss and dial it up to 11, because in the meeting itself, you can take notes, you can assign follow-ups, it's in writing, so everybody can refer to it. It's being witnessed, so hey, we agreed a week from now you were going to send me a file. It's been 4 days, just checking in on the thing you agreed to. And I've got some other people on copy. So like, if it doesn't happen, I'm not the patsy here. So like you're ultimately the one that's accountable. So this is now a blend across the authors, because I don't think Voss talks about this, and Cialdini's social proof doesn't necessarily talk about yes and how. But when you take yes and how with social proof, with consistency bias, you now have like almost like a weapons grade project management capability that ensures that the dependencies and things can continue to move forward. So this is where we're already starting to synthesize, but like, man, this all together was such an important lesson to learn in an environment where people are more than happy to say yes, hang up the phone, and go back to whatever they were doing before they talked to you.
And that's just the habit. That's just how they operate.
It's just the norm. It's just the norm. Yeah, it's just the norm. It's not a bad thing. It's not malicious. They're not bad people. They're not dumb people. It's just the way. It's like, oh, why is the fish wet? Well, it's just okay. It's the way that they exist. It's just it was a norm. It's an established norm.
And now that I'm thinking about this, obviously, like I read this multiple times, I just kind of forgot, and I'm reflecting on even, for example, our member/attendee onboarding process when we talk to new contributors, right? Now, obviously, there is like a transactional value of it, because I'm going to give you value, you're going to give some back to me, and we're going to mutually enrich, our worlds on a professional level. Now, with this, we never liked, and I never liked, and I don't know, maybe at some point it was a conscious decision as we like developed our processes, but maybe it just kind of emerged from the internalized knowledge that I always hated, like, oh, do you like it? Do you want to do it? Okay, you want to do it. It was always calibrated towards how. Look, for example, how do you see this helping you with X, Y, Z that you shared with me, right? Or if we're kind of on the same page, and you told me, for example, how it would help, and also we kind of covered, let's say, how we see the value that you would get and bring to the conversation, the next steps, even if you remember that how we started our relationship, was like, okay, cool, so how are we going to make this happen?
Yep.
Right? It was just that. It wasn't like, okay, let's like shake hands on it. Okay, cool, so how are we going to make this happen? Now, if you get a pushback on the how, what does that tell you? There was never a yes there. Maybe even the person didn't know that the yes wasn't there. That's very, very important. This is a litmus test. You can, for the benefit of both of you, and out of respect for each other too, expose if there's a misalignment between the word said and the reality. Because that yes might not be a yes. Don't put someone in that position when they need to, be stuck with committing to something that they didn't really actually commit to, and now it's out there, right? No, expose it, and it's fantastic. You can say, hey, you don't want the how. It feels like that actually there was a misalignment with the value, right? Again, I'm using another Voss tool there that it feels like. So now you're labeling, now you're doing even, I don't know if we talked about now specifically the accusation audit. Maybe it will be worth just talking specifically about the accusation audit, right?
That was in the labeling. We had
in the labeling, yes.
We like smushed them into one concept.
Yeah, and the accusation audit, by the way, even now, that's one of those tools that I've been kind of dropping here and there in the community as a very concrete thing, and it resonates so much with analytics leaders with the accusation audit, because a lot of times people have these underlying emotion, assumptions, concern, and all that, and by the accusation audit, as you have internal unarticulated accusations right now, and I'm auditing them, I'm calling them out, right? So just to kind of turn back to this one, again, so brilliant and simple that either you are going to what you saw before as an accountability and ownership gap, and you projected onto that your structured thinking, which is, there's an issue like structurally, but not having assigned ownership and responsibility, right? Your intuition that it's an ownership and accountability gap, probably correct, but the tool that you're trying to gap it with, this is the tool to gap it with. This is the tool where now you can assign that ownership and responsibility through strictly communications tactics. And if it's unsuccessful, now you succeeded in a whole other level of you gained invaluable information about the state of the negotiation that's taking place, because that's what's taking place, right? Negotiation of time and resources, always at home, at work, right? So yeah, this is again like one of those connections that probably existed before in my mind, but just got exposed.
Yeah, and you gave the personal anecdote earlier, so I'll give one for this one. So I am notoriously bad at anything that's paperwork related at home, right? So my wife, hey, did you do it yet? No. Will you do it? Yes. And then she's like, great, Saturday night, we'll incorporate it into date night. And I was like, okay, there we go. We're going to do it right there. So she fixed the how, right? Because I keep saying, yes, I'll do it. And then I forget and I go do other things. And I'm just notoriously bad at paperwork. But that's just a small example of the how. Now there's no escape, but now there's a full commitment. Now that paperwork's going to be done. It's going to be signed and done because we have a how. So and that's a personal example, but you can imagine the same thing in a professional setting, which, the accountability, the notes taking in the meeting. I learned the notes taking in the meeting from a guy I used to work with named Ben. He's the only person I've ever seen do it, but man, what a game changer. Like on screen, share your screen, take the notes on screen, create that record, do it in an email so you can just hit send and everyone has it. Like, what a game changer. Again, stealing from the synthesis portions, but like shout out to Ben for that one, because that was the trick to close the gap, I think, with this yes and how thing.
And I also found a question, I don't know if it's actually in the playbook, but what I found that, again, when this knowledge gets internalized, you will execute in a way that's might be actually perfect form. It's not articulated. One question that I found myself asking is like, what's the ideal process on your end from here? Right. So it's like,
I like that. Yeah.
So first of all, if we agreed that something should be done, well, that just implies we both know that there will be a process through which it can come to fruition. So what's the ideal? I'm not even asking what's your process. Like, what's the ideal process from your end? Because there's a process, and you have your like portion or your take of that process from here. So you kind of, okay, now we are here. What is the process from your end? The people answer it so easily, and it's always like very, very packed with concrete, fruitful, valuable things immediately, right?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. I love that.
And again, I haven't thought about it. Just I found myself using it again and again, probably because it works.
Yeah, I'm stealing that, man. That's going into I'm putting that in the quiver.
There you go.
Yeah. So it's been we've covered everything that we needed to get through for today. So just to recap again, this is Voss as a monolith, always worthy of attention, whether it's videos online, masterclass, or the book. We're focusing on the book. Go get the book. It's probably, of the four, if you're only going to buy one, this is the one, in my opinion, because I'm biased. It's my favorite. You may beg to differ when we talk about Claff. But this book talks about how to listen better, how to ask better questions, and then how to do better in any situation where there's negotiation. And in his mind, most, if not all situations have and a bit of negotiation. So the heavy hitters from this book, right? Make people feel heard, mirror, paraphrase, label, get those underlying feelings to the surface so they can be dealt with. Ask better questions. So you're listening, you're showing them that you're listening, and then you can ask questions, calibrated questions, open-ended questions to help even surface even more stuff, get them going, let them correct you, acknowledge that there's things that they know that you don't know. Have some humility in your questions. Careful with using why, because it can trigger defensiveness, right? Play the temperature game optimally, right? Use the no-oriented question to actually get closer to yes, right? Because we're not, there's so many things that I'm not opposed to, right? Or that I wouldn't object to, or that I wouldn't think are crazy, right? So that helps a lot to smooth some of the stuff out. And then when you get that yes, make sure you attach a how to it. Otherwise, it's gone as soon as you hang up the phone. All right, so those are the heavy hitters. Listen, ask, use no if you need to, and then make sure you have a how when you get to yes. Those are my, like I said, those have to be the ones. What would you add to that as far as like heavy hitters that you want to make sure that people don't walk away without reinforcing?
Well, honestly, now that I look at those, the accusation audit is such a brilliant example that, again, people can, for data analytics, use because it kind of covers all of that. So imagine that a huge issue that people always talk about, hey, I talk about this analytics solution and eyes glaze over, and there's no follow-up and all that. Now, use an accusation audit. It's a calibrated question. It's a labeling. It will evoke a no in every situation. For example, you say something, you have doubt about how that landed, you're not sure if the message got through, and you just call it out. You just audit that internal accusation of what people might have. It's like, hey, it feels like that you might have doubts about how that might actually work, right? So when people will say, no, I'm just looking to understand, right? So actually, you might either called out that, oh, hey, they do have that lack of understanding, and now you have the opportunity to unpack it and bring that clarity, right? Or you will get that, no, actually it's crystal clear because I see that this is how it works, X, Y, Z. Boom, fantastic. You gave the opportunity to someone to say no and feel safe about it. You build rapport by actually keeping them in the game, keeping that engagement. They feel listened to. They feel that, oh, you actually care about their involvement there as well. And again, accusation audit, because data analytics leaders a lot of times feel accused by their business counterparts. Usually, again, concern, apprehension, lack of understanding, confusion. Just call them out and do it, because this is the very thing that will help your relationships to thrive. A lot of times, again, we hear people say, hey, focus on relationships, not data. Wonderful, brilliant. I mean, we've been hearing this probably for 10 years now, but this is how you actually make it happen. So that would be my only take, is that you're looking at the accusation audit. This might be your tool that hits on all those notes.
Love it. And just tying off on making it happen, right? This stuff is astonishingly actionable. So like I said, you listen to this podcast, you have things you can implement immediately. You pick up his book, things you can implement immediately. I cannot stress enough how valuable that is as a practicing data science executive. I can't get bogged down with theory. I need application. So my last thought on the matter is like, go try a no question today. Okay, you need to eat. You may eat with another person. Would you be opposed to something? And then that something is what you actually want. So you want pizza? Would you be opposed to pizza? You want steak? Hey, would you be opposed to steak? All right, would it be crazy if we had Taco Tuesday on a Thursday? All of these different things, but try it. It's so actionable. I can't say enough nice things about it, but that's my final thought on Voss.
Well, my question for tonight, I already know what it is, will be like, hey, would you be opposed to watching Margin Call tonight?
There you go. Exactly.
That will be my question, you know?
Perfect.
That's great. And maybe then some thoughts about what's coming and still ties in there. And I remember I wanted to just, again, repeat a point that we will probably repeat again and again. When you said that one of your jobs as a data analytics leader is to make sure that everyone's facing the same direction. And there are all kinds of ways we can put it. Everyone's watching the same movie is usually my go-to. And probably when we talk about one of the grab bag books or I don't even know, maybe Win Big Leap will be its own. But it's like one of the main concepts of it's very, very possible and happens all the time when there's one objective reality. I mean, we can say that this happens all the time, but that's more like a philosophical question for another day. But let's say that there's an objective reality always happening, and yet people have all kinds of different takes and opinions. They are watching a different movie of the same thing. And I feel like the data analytics leaders are in a very, very unique position of being an authority on making sure that people watch the same movie. I mean, you have the CEO, who's the chief executive, whose kind of job to make sure that happens, but they are the CEO, right? So they are kind of like an authority of the authority of a very special kind. But you're, as the purveyor of truth, as kind of the steward of this objective reality, I mean, as close as a business can get to understanding and seeing what's actually happening, I mean, that's what data analytics is. Let's look at reality, distill it into something that we can observe, and then act on those observations in unison, right? So you can be that in a very, very one-of-a-kind, special way in the business. The gap there is obviously, again, the communications tools, because you have access to reality. With the right communication, you can get closer to that reality. And with the same tools, you can also bring all these perspectives together. And that's where business value happens. So that would be my kind of a transition into also what's coming, because we're going to continue on the same thread.
Yes, and specifically, which thread are we going to pull on next time?
Okay, so next time we have my favorite book, which is Oren Klaff's Pitch Anything. Now, Oren Klaff is a venture capitalist. So he's a guy who developed this very special method of like investment banking pitches. That's the main idea. If you have something, you know it's good, you believe in it, you understand how it works, and there's an external party that you need something from, their time, their attention, their resources, right? Whatever those resources are. And how can you bypass the defensive mechanisms which naturally occur? I mean, again, if someone is besieged by a particular thing all the time, usually asks. In a business setting, it's usually for a senior person who's a decision maker who you actually are trying to convince. They're getting asked all the time certain things. How can you bypass that? How can you position yourself the right way in that dynamic? Again, that if what you have on offer will actually give them value, that they understand why, and they also will want to drive this forward. So I think this is, again, one of those connections that I haven't seen out there, but it's so obvious that, for example, even in the startup world, getting investment, it's a very specific scenario with a lot of skills and insights built. You have all the 99% snake oil salesman and the 1% gold information. Just no one really connected those dots in an explicit way, which I think the next episode will fill the gap on, of how can you take the mastery from that world and the effectiveness of communication in that world that helps these big deals happen for the enrichment of relationships and for mutual value to everyone, and how can you bring that particular skill and just completely level up your conduct as a data analytics practitioner. So that will be the next episode. I don't know, how's that for a teaser?
That's a great teaser, and I'll tell you, as the resident data science executive, the way you pitched, like you stood it up with, you're trying to get investment, you're trying to sell something, you believe in it, you want to, and you're going to people that are besieged with asks, and these are usually fairly significant asks. You could literally swap investment banker with data science, and it would verbatim fit, because we're very expensive. We ask for a lot of attention. We ask for a lot of investment. So I think this is eminently transferable to the craft, and I look forward to diving into it with you because you've got such a strong conviction. And I read the book; I'm a huge fan of it as well. So this will be a fun one.
Yeah, absolutely. We want to give those beautiful, wonderful solutions that all these data analytics people are building the best shot at,
Yes.
at coming to reality and coming to life. So fantastic, sir. I really appreciate the work that you put in this, and I really enjoyed the conversation. I do believe in it, that it will give great value to everyone who dares to use it. Use it tonight. Pick your no calibrated question that will evoke that desired no. How's that for some counterintuitive insights, and then we'll see each other next week.
Yes, sir. All right. Take care.